Europe can do with much less fossil gas much earlier. The climate crisis and the energy security and energy price crisis have created the need to revisit the role of fossil gas in the transition to climate neutrality.
With its climate law, the EU committed to achieve climate neutrality by 2050 at the latest. But how do we do that in a just and sustainable manner?
The role of fossil gas in the transition to climate neutrality as a so-called bridge fuel is being fundamentally challenged. At the same time, fossil gas still plays a pervasive role in our economy, and this makes it a very challenging process.
We developed a detailed transition pathway out of fossil gas use for the industry, buildings and energy sector. Europe can halve its fossil gas use by 2030 and fully phase out fossil gas use by 2050, only based on the structural reduction of demand and without creating new import dependencies.
There are three key levers for achieving these fossil gas consumption reductions. First is energy efficiency, so renovating our homes and making our industrial processes more efficient.
Second, we will scale up the deployment of renewable energies, and especially in the power sector, wind and solar will play a big role. And last, with this new renewable electricity that we can produce, we can directly electrify most of the applications that are currently using fossil gas instead.
Renewables-based hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives such as ammonia will also play an important role in the period after 2030 in certain applications, especially certain industrial processes, as well as in power as backup as seasonal storage.
If we manage to also add behavioral changes from the population, that will make the whole endeavor much easier.
Our research shows that the building sector is the first to become fossil gas free already shortly after 2040. This is largely achieved through the deployment of heat pumps in buildings, industry and district heating, as well as electric boilers in the industry. The energy sector is the one to achieve the fastest gas consumption reductions in the decade up to 2030.
In the industry sector, the subsectors behave a bit differently from each other. What we observe is the chemical sector. The machinery and transport equipment and iron and steel have the biggest potential to contribute to demand reduction by 2040. They could actually completely phase out from fossil gas already by then.
The existing European budget offers a lot of funding that can be used to leverage the investments that we need into the structural demand reduction.
We have calculated that the energy-related investments in energy, buildings, and industry amount to roughly 200 billion per year in the decade up to 2030 and rise to roughly 250 billion per year in the decades afterwards.
This is about 1.5% of the current European GDP.
Around 30% of that will need to be covered by public funds to help us leverage private investments of households and businesses. At the same time, the EU funds already available up until 2030 for green transition serve as a very solid base for accelerating the phase out of fossil gas. The results of the study have several very important policy implications for the climate, gas, and buildings-related initiatives at EU level.
And I would name 5 of those. So first, the EU has to set ambitious climate target goals.
Our modeling suggests Europe should set its 2040 climate target at minus 90% greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990 levels.
Second, the member states have to update their national energy and climate plans as quickly as possible
to align them with the new Fit for 55 package and the REPowerEU plan.
Third,
the European Commission should undertake a new analysis of the gas and methane package, particularly as regards the role of hydrogen and biomethane, because both the political and economic context have fundamentally changed compared to when the package was proposed.
Fourth, national governments and authorities need to start preparing for the foreseeable decline of gas consumption in future and evaluate the impact on national infrastructure, be it for transmission and also distribution of gas. And fifth, the sale of fossil-based equipment in the buildings sector has to end as quickly as possible.
This has very important implications for some of the regulatory decisions currently being taken at EU level.
Overall, we need a fundamental reset of how we think the role of fossil gas in the energy transition to achieve climate neutrality by 2050.